Here on Flow FM, it's good to continue the nuclear conversation that some of our political leaders want us to be having. So I thought we'd check in with the Vice President of the Australian Nuclear Association, Dr. Mark Ho. How are you, Mark?
Good, thanks.
Mark, look, it's great to have you with us. Just give us a bit of an explanation, first of all, what it is that's your day job and how significant that is in the Australian nuclear sector in terms of how many facilities we have here in Australia.
Right, so my day job is over at ANSTO, which stands for Australian Nuclear Science Technology Organisation. And the campus is based in the middle of Sydney, actually, like it's in the suburbs of Sydney, southwest, about 40 minutes drive from the CBD. We've got a little research reactor, 20 megawatts, so it just produces heat. What they call thermal research reactor that makes a whole bunch of neutrons to make medical radioisotopes, which services a lot of Australians, as well as making neutrons for neutron science, so discovering the structure of materials for materials research, and does other things as well, such as how do we treat radioactive waste, and how do we do radiation monitoring, a whole suite of different things. So I would say, ANSTO is pretty much the centre of Australian nuclear science technology in Australia. We've got another campus in Melbourne as well, with a synchrotron, which is an extremely bright light source to also investigate the structure of matter. But we do all things nuclear sciencey.
Yeah, that's a nice way to wrap it up. You're a reactor heat transfer specialist, so you've got qualifications really working up close with these reactors. What does that actually mean for reactor heat transfer?
So when we have a reactor, we're very, very much concerned with two things. One, which is calculating how the reactor produces that nuclear heat, what we call neutronics, or the interaction of subatomic particles. And we're also concerned, of course, with how to safely take that heat away to either basically get heat reject to keep the reactor stable and safe. That's what my job is. My job is really to make these very, very complex computer models of the reactor core and to simulate the way it's cooled. And of course, we're also very fixed on making sure that what we call the operation of the reactor or the reactor transients are also safe as well. That means that we can shut down and it remains cool.
Now, when you mentioned, I just want to take away point there you mentioned there earlier, we currently have a nuclear reactor within 40 minutes drive of the Sydney CBD, and I gather people live relatively close to it.
Yeah, a lot of people aren't aware of it. We're just kind of plugging away and making medical radioisotopes, and not a lot of people are aware. We're trying to improve that, to tell people about the good news and what all the good things are happening there.
Now, here in Australia, that's our awareness, and you fly under the radar to some degree, but around the world, nuclear reactors are being deployed to solve energy challenges and crises, as well as for medical research. Just give us a bit of a broad brush of just how many countries, say, in the G20 are actually using nuclear energy technology.
Well, nearly all the industrializations use nuclear power. They're unlike Australia. They're not as blessed with all sorts of choices. And so, internationally, there's about 440 power reactors around the world, and they are really, really large reactors. They produce 1,000 megawatts of electricity each, say, And to put that in perspective, the largest coal-fired power station in Australia is probably about 750 megawatts. And they've been supplying stable and reliable electricity for, about 40 years plus. And these nuclear power plants, they last for a long time. So a lot of people might have classic cars, for instance. You think of it as a very, very well-maintained piece of equipment that's kind of over-engineered. And it's because of that reason, all that tender loving care that keeps those reactors going, that's the basis of that, the backbone of the nuclear fleet that supplies 10% of the world's electricity without carbon, without emissions, apart from water vapor.
Now that you talk about those sort of the backbone of the fleet, but all the buzz seems to be about, if you like, the Tesla of the nuclear fleet, the new emerging technology that is small modular reactors. So we're not talking in the instance of what people are discussing for Australia's energy needs of something to replace directly, the hundreds of megawatts of capacity in coal. We're talking here about something that might just add 100 or 200 megawatts in specific locations.
Yeah, that's very true. So there's a lot happening internationally, with our friends in the US and Canada, in the UK, and then also other kind of countries like in Russia and China as well. They're all looking at small modular reactors, and people ask like, why small modular reactors? Well, to put that into perspective, in the past, reactors were built extremely large, okay, and you have to build them out in the open. And it takes a lot longer because you do that. But for small modular reactors, because they're smaller, as you said, 300 megawatts or less, they can be produced on a production line in a more controlled factory environment. And that way they can be made faster, they can be made more reliably at a higher standard. And also just by virtue of design, because you have a smaller core, it also makes the safety case better as well. So the nuclear regulator would say, wow, this smaller modular reactor, it's got a smaller core, it's got a smaller heat source. And so when you shut it down, it's also easier to remain cool. And you do that by doing something called having a passive safety system where you have a huge volume of water available on site at hand so that it's ready to go to keep the reactor cool. Something that's different from, reactors of the past.
Now, this is something that is actually being deployed. Say, Rolls-Royce are putting together 3 factories to put these small modular reactors out, I believe. But I remember hearing that now the next generation, they're already talking about small modular reactors that don't really require any water at all.
Yeah, that's very true. So to give the audience a little bit more of a heads up, some of the newer small modular reactors rolling off the line, they're water-cooled of traditional design, but near future designs that's actually being switched on in places like China, and then in the past in Germany and in Japan, they were doing research into, for example, what they call gas-cooled reactor, high-temperature gas-cooled reactor. They don't just use air, they use helium, like a very light element, and that will allow you to operate at a much higher temperature, which will give you the advantage of being able to do, say, making hydrogen or to desalinate water more efficiently. And also, because it's operating at a higher temperature, it's also easier to keep cool just by using the air. So you don't actually have to have a running water to keep that reactor cool.
Well, as part of this ongoing conversation in Australia about the possibility of nuclear energy in the mix, I gather people can go to your website, nuclearaustralia.org.au, where they can find out more balanced information about these topics.
Yep, that's what we do. Please come and visit us.